Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're hoping to get some interaction from everybody, so we're hoping you'll join us on Slido. So if you go to Slido, if you select the session moving language instruction for newcomers online, that would be great. And then we'll be able to answer your questions as well as have some participation. So our session is moving language instruction for newcomers to Canada online, assessing the impact of the emergency remote teaching during COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to start by acknowledging the land that we're on. And we're 3 different colleges in 3 different provinces. So we'll start with Douglas College, which is located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish people of the Kikite and the Kwikwetlam First Nations. Red River College is located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe Cree, Obiji Cree, Dakota, and Dene people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. NorQuest College is located on the traditional lands referred to as Treaty 6 territory. Treaty 6 encompasses the traditional territories of numerous Western Canadian First Nations, as well as the Métis people. We thank them for the land use. Who are we? So I'm Lisa Rochman. I'm from NorQuest College in Edmonton, Alberta. We have with us today on our panel, Anna Jenkin-Kelly, who's the program manager at Red River College in Winnipeg. We have Christine Wood, who is the instructional coordinator at Douglas College Training Group in Surrey, BC. And we have Tara Penner, who's the associate chair for the LINC program at NorQuest College in Edmonton. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? We're going to start, here's the outline for our presentation. I'm going to give you an overview of the study, of the research that we did. Then we're going to talk about the findings. We're going to talk about the findings in terms of our students, in terms of our instructors, and we're taking into account that LINC is a funded program. And then we're going to open it up for some discussion. We have some questions for you, and perhaps you have some questions for us. So what is this study? NorQuest College, along with many other post-secondaries, and specifically here at Douglas College and Red River College, all moved to teaching LINC online as of March. This was unexpected. Nobody had planned it. There's a difference between online teaching, which is a well-organized, thought-out course, and emergency online teaching. So as schools across the country moved to online very fast, everyone had different levels of experience and everyone brought a different background. But our students, none of them were prepared for online because they weren't in online deliveries. So we decided that this was an excellent opportunity to study this, to see what happened, to see what worked, to see what didn't, and figure out what can we take from this experience to improve our online teaching in general, and what can we share with the system. So we got our ethics approval, of course, and then we went on to start a survey. We sent out this survey in July of 2020. Most of the programs moved online in March of 2020. So just so you have a sense of how long people had been online. Tara, next slide, please. We had a pretty good response. We had close to 800 people, where 735 were students and 49 of them were instructors. The student survey asked a variety of different questions. We looked at their demographics, their technological use, their access to technology. What challenges did they face during this emergency remote teaching? What were they satisfied with? What support was working? What services could they access? Did they access? And how did they think their learning progressed? The instructor survey looked at questions on instructor challenges. What were their successes? What supports did they have and what supports did they need? And what are some general reflections they had on this experience? I'd like to thank our funder, Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. Additionally, our surveys were run with LINC programs, and LINC, which is funded by Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada, is a language and settlement program for all newcomers to Canada. I think most of you are probably pretty familiar with it, so I'll leave it at that. And at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Anna to take us from here.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I think it's afternoon for everybody. My name is Anna Yannick-Kelly. I am representing Red River College, and thank you again to NorQuest and Douglas and IRCC for partnering and making this study possible. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some findings when it comes to students' perspective on LINC Online and the transition to online learning. And at the end of the towards the end of my part of the presentation, I will have a few questions. So hopefully if Slido works and we can monitor that, we will be able to gather some ideas from our audience about how some of those challenges can be minimized or managed better so that we can continue to provide the best services for our students. So thank you, Tara. So a little bit about the demographics of the participants in the study. 2/3 of our participants identified as women, and most of our participants are between 31 and 50 years of age. We can also see that when it comes to their time in Canada, the newcomers aren't that new, that most have been here for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And only about 28% have been in Canada for less than 1 year. You will also be able to see that most students have dependents that they're taking care of, and between 1, 2, 3, 4 dependents that live in them in the same household. So the household size is between 2 and 5 people for the majority of our students. When it comes to their level of education, so that's our next slide, you will see that a lot of our students have at least a high school diploma, but there are a lot of students who have less than 12 years of education as well. We do see a lot of students with bachelor's degrees, college diplomas, master's degrees, so some type of post-secondary education as well. And this is important just when it comes to the level of digital skills as well. Then when it comes to the employment status, we looked at the employment status of the student population before COVID hit, so before that March 2020 transition to the transition now. And we see that before COVID-19, 43% of our students were employed, and about 8% of students have lost employment after COVID hit, so when the study was conducted in July 2020. On our next slide, we also looked at students' experience with LINC programming. So from all the participants, about 3/4 have taken LINC classes before. And of those students, about 27% have indicated that they have taken LINC classes online before COVID-19. But looking at the respondents' preferred type of course, we see that the majority prefers either classroom-only delivery, so that's 41%, or some sort of hybrid delivery between a mix of online delivery and classroom delivery. There were only 16% of participants who indicated that they prefer online delivery only. And some of this might be explained in the next slide when we look at the technology access among the students. So next slide, please. So we see that when it comes to the devices used for learning, most students use a laptop, and that's 76%, and 38% use a phone as well. Desktop and tablet were 12% and 11% respectively. We looked into this a little bit further in the study and analyzed also single device users. And about 12% of those who access LINC classes access those classes through their phone, which might not be the best means when it comes to interacting. So when it comes to interacting, on our next slide, we see that the methods of communication with instructor, students relied heavily on email, that's 80%. 54% used an online learning platform, and those are usually typical of the institution that students are associated with. So at NorQuest, this is Moodle. At Red River College, it's Learn, so D2L or Brightspace. I think it has 17 names. And then I am not sure what Douglas uses, but it also is an online learning platform. So there are also phone calls and video conferencing, usually through MS Teams with students. Now, when we go to the next slide, we see that most students said that it's very easy for them to get online to class. So 58% and 30% respectively agreed or strongly agreed that it is easy to get online for class. We also asked students about their satisfaction with internet access and connection, and 20% of students did express some sort of dissatisfaction with either their internet access or connection, and this might be due to multiple factors related even to demographics. So if we go to the next slide, I would just like to summarize what an average student in LINC class looks like. So we see that they're using a laptop to access their class, and you will need to keep clicking, Tara. They're in their late 30s when it comes to their age. And some of them are bachelors, but not this type of bachelors. They have a bachelor's degree. So that's next click, Tara. Yes, they have a degree or some sort of post-secondary education. And next slide, next picture. There are 1, 2, 3 kids there usually around them. So that's actually a picture from March or April of this year when all of my kids were at home and I was trying to work and manage their learning as well. There were a lot of unicorn pictures printed out during meetings. So right now we're going to look at the student challenges that they faced, and on the side in the orange rectangle you will see the access to Slido, and hopefully it works. And the question that we're asking here is, what are some successful strategies to enhance student-student interactions online? So if you guys are able to submit answers, that would be fantastic. And if not, we're going to try and gather your ideas in some other way. We see from the findings in this study that most of the students said that taking tests online and communicating with other students were the most difficult parts of participating in online classes. We also see completing assignments online was somehow challenging. That's about 27% of students. Participating in class activities, communicating with instructor, and accessing materials. So a lot of activities related with that digital literacy posed a challenge for just under 20% of students. And I think a lot of students have learned while they were learning. So we were building a bridge while we were walking on it. But it's that interaction with other students that seemed the most difficult part of learning online. So the second challenge that we have discovered throughout the study, and again, I'm going to maybe ask the question first. The question is, how can we help learners develop time management strategies? So that time management came out to be on top of additional challenges experienced by the students and having lack of quiet place to study as well. So we know, given our demographics, that a lot of students have a lot of things on the go, be it family, be it potentially work. accessing classes on time, it becomes very difficult to focus and to fully engage in an online learning space. And if there are any ideas that are coming forward regarding how we can help our learners develop time management strategies, I'm going to jump to Lisa because Lisa knows it all.
Just taking a step back from the last question, we did have 2 more answers come in about people were talking about embedded links and sharing screens as ways. And then for this question, we have using WhatsApp groups have helped.
Okay, WhatsApp groups. So some of the challenges that we had, our institution said that WhatsApp was not going to be endorsed, let's say, by our institution because of some safety and privacy concerns. Students, however, do have access to LearnShell, so the online learning system at the college. But again, maybe students can even manage between themselves and organize themselves into groups. That would also work. Let's jump to the third group of challenges, I think. And the question here that I posed is, how can LINC programming online be better accessible for students with disabilities? So when we look at the answers to the question we asked about satisfaction with services, the biggest challenge laid with students who might require additional services or supports when it comes to disability or when it comes to career services. We know a lot of those services were provided face-to-face, and with COVID hitting us, some things have to move online, but depending on the disability, supporting students might be much more challenging. So we would definitely be looking for some innovative ideas of how to better provide services to students who face additional barriers. Luckily, I think when it comes to health and wellness, a lot of our students, so over 70% of our students, almost 80%, if I'm adding correctly, I'm sorry, I'm not a math whiz, but this 32 plus 48, 80% of students were somewhat satisfied or very satisfied with health and wellness supports that were made available to them throughout the pandemic. So this is really good news. And Lisa, do we have any suggestions for how to better support students with disabilities?
We do. We've had some suggestions come in. Discussion questions on Google Classrooms, breakout rooms, giving sample workday plans for time management, screen sharing, embedded links, as we mentioned, and then again, breakout rooms, and then providing less time virtually and more time asynchronously to help with time management. And some of these responses are from your prior question.
So do we have any new ideas on how we can support our students with additional barriers better during online programming?
So the first one that we have is supporting students with disabilities using video and audio lessons, providing alternative ways to complete assignments, Flipgrid, voice recorder. We also have doing 1/3 of the class synchronously and 2/3 asynchronously, but they're also mentioning that you still get complaints that the students don't have enough instructor time. And then there's another question that about how this study, the results could transfer. And I think we'll put that one to the later part when we'll have it in the discussion.
So I think I'm going to move this over. We would definitely always welcome any additional questions. We can provide our contact information at the end, but I'm going to move it over to Christine. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I also want to thank Red River College and NorQuest College for inviting Douglas to participate in this unique survey experience. The results have definitely been very interesting. So for my piece, I'm going to talk about the instructor impacts and challenges. And you'll notice a fair bit of crossover in terms of student challenges and instructor challenges having some similarities at least. So we can go to the next slide and look at who are the instructors in the LINC programs at these 3 colleges. So only about 35% had taught online before the transition, and only 14 of those were teaching LINC online. So that's quite a low number in my opinion. So it was new for a lot of instructors. In terms of class size, it looks like the average is anywhere from 15 to 29 students, and that makes up close to 60%. Just on a side note here, I teach a LINC level 1-2 split, and my class is about 14 students maximum. Course load, we have just over half of courses being full-time. Next, part-time, and then full and part-time making up about 10%. CLB level, we are fairly evenly distributed across the levels. You can see that higher than LINC 5 is probably a bit higher than the other one, so 29%, but they're all around the same percentage there. So next slide. So instructor challenges. So one of the main instructor challenges that also came up for students as well is access to appropriate technology and digital literacy. A lot of students struggle with digital literacy. Douglas College, where I am in Surrey, we have a lot of lower level students who have very little experience on a computer at all, if ever, before they had to move to remote learning. So there's been a lot of challenge surrounding digital literacy as well as technology. The students' perceptions of remote learning and learner environments, also another challenge. And assessment related concerns. So how can we do assessments remotely? So next slide. In terms of student access, the most commonly cited concerns amongst instructors are students not checking emails. I think a lot of that has to do with habits of students and them not usually checking email, especially an English email, on a daily basis. And another issue is reliance on non-optimal technologies for class attendance and accessing online materials. So a lot of our students, if they do have a laptop, it's outdated or they're sharing it. But many students join on their smartphones, and it can be troublesome to join certain platforms and get into Moodles and whatnot on some of those phones. So next slide. So I have a few comments from instructors about access issues for students. So I'll kind of briefly read through them. The biggest issue I face is being able to get an accurate depiction of what my students can and can't do, especially in writing. Typing is a very different skill than writing in a notebook. I have some previous students repeating this term who I know can write well, however, their writing ability seems to have regressed. One barrier is the students lack experience with technology and typing. Some students are improving with capitals, punctuation, and spacing, but it's still a challenge. The largest challenge is that many students either join classes on their smartphones because they lack laptops or they have a poor internet connection, but both scenarios affect functionality. Differing levels of technical skill and comfort. So some students respond quickly to messages and emails, others don't. Significant lag time can be an issue. Synchronous communication can be problematic due to connectivity issues, inferior technology, etc. Some students are using phones to connect. Some have old laptops that don't always work, etc. Next slide, please. So learner environment and students' perception of online learning. So instructors highlighted various factors affecting the learner environment, challenges related to childcare. So, you know, as an instructor, I can see children running around in the background behind my students while they're trying to learn. So they have no one to watch their kids. Competing responsibilities in and outside of the home. Financial concerns either brought on by COVID-19 or even pre-existing financial concerns, and just social isolation, right? Not having that in-person connection with their instructor, with their classmates, with their friends and family. And some instructors also noted challenges related to student engagement and buy-in. So some students right away were like, no, I'm not going to learn online, and nothing could convince them to even try it. Some of them just really couldn't see how it would help to improve their English. They were really focused on having that in-person teacher. Okay, next slide, please. So here are some instructor comments on learning environment and students' perception. So the atmosphere is not as relaxed because we are not as comfortable communicating in an online environment where we can't see each other's faces and we have very limited teaching time. It feels sort of impersonal. When lower level students do the asynchronous learning, I think they get more frustrated because there's quite a lot for them to do each day. And when they don't understand something, they have no one to ask and they get tired. I think some students have difficulty concentrating on the asynchronous learning because they live with a lot of people, they can't find a quiet place to study. Some students just always have difficulty getting a good internet connection. Lack of participation and engagement due to a variety of reasons, so accessibility, availability, personal commitment clashes, technical competence, a lack of desire for online learning. I think the biggest challenge about teaching online during this pandemic is that it is a pandemic and we are expected to carry on almost as normal. Students have so many more issues to deal with, including childcare, income loss, concerns about friends and family around the world. The amount of work we are requiring our students to do is really difficult for them. This is not the same as choosing to teach or learn online. The world is totally upside down and causing a lot of anxiety and stress for everyone. Okay, so next slide. So now we can look at some assessment challenges. So instructors highlighted inherent assessment challenges that come with remote teaching. So just administering reliable assessments in the 4 skill areas through virtual means, it can be very, very challenging. We've had to be very creative with students taking pictures of their writing and emailing it to the teacher, all of these sorts of things. And how do we ensure students are not cheating or copying or getting help, right? So ensuring academic integrity. And then it takes extra time to provide feedback. And sometimes we don't know if students are able to respond or even understand the feedback that we're trying to give them. Okay, so next slide. So some instructors' comments about assessment. Assessing the listening skill is challenging since there are few opportunities to listen to individual students. I think the hardest thing for me to stay motivated about is assessments. Creating, marking, and uploading assessments in e-portfolios takes about 3 times longer than it did in the classroom. Although I have thoroughly explained how to see feedback, I rarely get follow-up questions. So it makes me wonder if students are actually checking their feedback and applying it to their mistakes. It's hard to make a judgment about students' progress as there's likelihood that students get help completing assessments and tasks assigned to them. We actually made a decision early on in the pandemic that we would reduce the number of assessments that instructors were expected to do to help lighten their load, because it is challenging to make sure that we're doing it correctly and not causing additional stress on ourselves or the learners. Okay, so next slide, we'll look at some effective strategies that instructors mentioned as ways to cope with some of these issues. So as some of the people in Slido have already mentioned, the use of breakout rooms. These are great for putting students into groups and taking a bit of the responsibility and focus off the instructor. Interactive games to make the lessons more fun. Incorporating audio and visuals effectively. I didn't show a lot of videos when I was in-person teaching, but I found online it sort of breaks up the lesson a little bit and students appreciate it, assuming I can find a level appropriate video, which is tough for my level. Offering help to individual students. So we have teachers that have created office hours where they set up one-on-one appointments with students and give them a little bit of individual help. Providing individualized and peer feedback and other interactive activities to try to increase student talking time. Okay, next slide. Just a couple of comments about the effective strategies. Routine, routine, routine. Get a consistent system going for the students so they know what to expect. Also, more repetition than usual seems to be helping. Each lesson has a similar structure: intro question, flashcards, substitution dialogues, etc. Homework assignment. Homework is 5 links, the last of which is a SCORM, so I can track daily progress. It seems to be working. I use different activities in each session and chunk them into small parts. I use breakout rooms to let students discuss their ideas. I use different types of activities, for example, listening to audios, watching videos, reading, etc. Also, I use photos, different types of file formats, and anything to make the session more interesting. Next slide. So some successes. A lot of positives have come out of this experience. So some that were mentioned in the study: an opportunity for both students and instructors to learn new skills and strategies. Huge learning curve, larger for some than others. And a lot of my instructors are still learning how to navigate this new reality. An opportunity for instructors to develop their awareness and experience with remote teaching technology. An enhancement of digital literacy among students. This is a big one. It's unfortunate we didn't have much of a warning, and so we couldn't get our students up to speed in time for remote learning. And that's been a definite challenge, is them, having trouble even turning on a computer, and how do you show that to them remotely? It's a huge challenge, but we've come a long way. And also an increased confidence related to online teaching. Teachers feel much more confident and at ease with it, and now they've added it to their repertoire of skills. And some comments on the next slide. Some students that usually are shy and nervous in class have found a voice by being behind a screen. So we can see that some students thrive in such an environment. Putting content online does not mean that teaching and learning goals are being met. Instructors and students are learning what success can mean in this new online world for both parties. Successes are many. Students are very resilient and open to learning in this new environment. As are instructors, online communities are being built with students connecting in breakout rooms in BB with each other and their instructor during online webinars, phone chats, Moodle messaging, email, etc. BB, I think, is big blue button on the Avenue and EduLink Moodle. I'm surprised by the tenacity of my learners logging into class each day. I've realized that I need to continue making digital skills a top priority in my future lessons when we are back in class. And the next slide. So you can see that there's a large increase in instructor confidence across 4 different areas. So teaching English language online is the most significant. Using an e-learning platform, communicating with students online, and leading discussion online. have all seen increase in instructor confidence. So instructor development, I'm learning a lot about helping my students with troubleshooting. This is great as I feel like I'm able to help them solve problems, and when they succeed, they are so pleased with themselves. I've done a lot of professional development during this time. It was time-consuming but rewarding. I spent a lot of time designing digital activities. I never thought I would make it this far. I've grown immensely in my ability to integrate technology into my lessons, and I'm also growing in my capacity to teach tech skills to my students. This is a positive outcome. This mode of teaching, however, challenges our ability to foster an appropriate work-life balance. And then we have a couple of discussion questions. So in addition to some of the strategies that I mentioned through the slides, when it comes to access, learning environment, and online assessments, what are some successful strategies that you or your organization have used? And question 2, how can we improve student and teachers' perceptions of online learning? So if you want to respond in the Slido, give you a couple minutes.
Christine,
yes.
We want to address another question that came in is how do we reduce the number of assessments and still follow the PBLA guidelines?
I think, so the way that assessments are calculated, I think there's like 1 assessment per 9 hours of teaching time is about the average that they recommend. So because we're not physically teaching the students for as many hours, there's a logical process that gets us to a reduced number of assessments. And as far as I know, that's up to each institution to decide for themselves. Yeah, but I could be wrong. But as far as I know, reduced contact time should equal reduced number of assessments. But I'd love to hear if people are doing the recommended PBLA amount. If anybody out there has a comment about that, I'd love to hear about it, because I don't know that we're there yet. Okay, so while we're doing that, in terms of student access, one thing that Douglas College did recently, unfortunately, we had to close an undersupplied evening class, which in turn freed up about 9 hours a week. And what we did is we approached IRCC and we said, would we be able to use those 9 hours a week to develop a digital literacy support person to help students with onboarding into online classes? We've only been doing that for a couple months, but it's been going really well. And we find that students more quickly get adapted to online learning and are quite successful, and they continue their program and don't give up and quit. So we're having those, it's actually a shared position between 2 people. So they meet students on site and as well as remotely, and they just help to support them. They get them into their classes, they get them onto the Moodle site they need to be on, they get them connected with their instructor. These 2 positions also act as instructional support when needed as well. So they can help teachers with their online teaching. And one of them just finished her stage 4 of Learn IT to Teach. So she's an expert there, and we have her helping everybody out with Avenue and EduLink, which is the Moodle that Douglas College uses currently, at least for the LINC program, not mainstream Douglas.
And we've had a couple comments coming in that people either are not allowed to reduce the number of assessments or they're not reducing them, but it is taking longer.
Okay.
One more comment. We've been creating a lot of online resources and orientation packages for both instructors and learners. And I think that's about it.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I think Tara's going to speak to the funded program perspective. Thank you.
Yeah, so my name is Tara Penner, and I'm from NorQuest College, an associate chair in the LINC program. I'm also a board director for New Language Solutions. So I'm going to talk a little bit too about the research that New Language Solutions has done to kind of give a context of LINC programming and technology enhanced language learning. Just to give you a little bit of context for pre-pandemic and during pandemic. And also, of course, offer some strategies and support and ask for some of your suggestions as well, because I think we're all in this situation together, and we certainly need the support from our community partners as well. So a little bit of the context of technology enhanced language learning. It is a normalized part of language learning. So we've moved from this idea of computer assisted language learning, where we're learning the tools, we're learning how to use a computer or how to use a smartphone. We've now expanded that idea that tech is a normalized part of language learning. It's crucial for settlement. It's crucial for work. It's crucial for social communication, for communities of practice, for personal learning networks. And then the skills that students are learning in the classroom are just preparation for what they're going to be doing in the real world. And it's a safe environment. It's a safe environment to make mistakes and learn. Tech enhanced language learning helps achieve settlement goals. So there is a settlement gap. So it is really that technology, learning the technology in the classroom for what will be used in the workplace. So whether it be just even learning how to use Google Drive or learning how to upload documents, that kind of thing. Those are the kind of technologies that'll be faced in work environments. So it's really, learning how to develop those skills to find information online, to study and apply online, to write online. Yeah, all of that. It improves access through flexible delivery models. So LINC is funded and free, so that is very accessible, but many learners experience barriers to access through childcare, family obligations, the winter, health, illness, transportation, work shifts. Those are all barriers, and they're often more difficult for women. So tech enhanced language learning, so whether it be online or a blended program, does improve that access through those flexible delivery models. Promotes self-efficacy. So we even heard that through a lot of our responses to students feeling more confident in their skills. They didn't feel confident before, but when they started learning online and developing the skills, they realized that they could do it. So that belief in self, belief in ability, it really affects how a student handles new tasks and approaches new tasks and approaches new tasks even in the workplace. And of course, building social connections. So tech enhanced language learning definitely teaches learners how to access the social networks, how, what is appropriate social communication. So it really is important in language learning, but we're in a pandemic context, so it is different. There is a digital divide in Canada. There are differences in how people benefit from technology, their activity with technology, and connection. So that first layer of connection is extremely important. So a lot of learners, a lot of our learners have been dependent on public access, so through libraries and public spaces for their Wi-Fi connections. And all of these were closed during COVID. So, I have the note here that COVID has increased the inequalities that existed pre-pandemic. Well, if learners were only connecting to the internet through those public spaces and they were closed, it just has heightened that, that divide, or widened the divide, I should say. A lot of learners use pay-as-you-go cell phones. They're cheaper to purchase, but they cost more per minute. And a lot of our newcomers spend a higher percentage of their budget on communications and sacrifice other basic needs to pay for them, particularly if they have school-age children. So society grows more polarized if we have limited access. And yeah, and you know, if we even think about the activities that we do online, New Language Solutions has a great example of somebody who has, and I've linked it here, and it's also in the resources, of seamless access and limited access, and what activity looks like during the day. I mean, if we think about all the things that we do online, banking online, accessing government websites, researching community events, downloading apps and software, making phone calls, searching for health-related information, using the internet for education and training. These are all really important activities, and without connection, it really limits a lot of people, and really does create a divide. So despite declaring the internet as a basic right in 2016, Canada does not have universal affordable internet access to everyone. So federal and provincial governments have a role to play in helping people respond to the rapidly changing and expanding digital demands, particularly when more essential services are moved online. So digital learning and access opportunities provided by LINC programming really does help to narrow that divide. So that's just a little bit of the context of language learning and technology. So some of the strategies and supports that I think all of our programs, and working with these other partners like Douglas College and Red River College, it's been quite wonderful to share ideas, to talk about strategies and supports for our most important areas of difficulty that we have. We do need strategies, and we do need supports, and we need community partners. So access is a huge important topic. Learners need access to affordable internet, and they need access to appropriate devices. I think a lot of our programs have been responsive, and they've been trying their very best to provide appropriate devices for learners. And that has been kind of Canada-wide, from what I've heard, a little more challenging in the rural areas, but that's been an area of response. Training to develop digital literacy for learners and teachers, and that's been equally important, actually. We often talk about the learners needing the digital literacy skills, but teachers certainly have needed the digital literacy skills as well. And places like New Language Solutions have been providing training for teachers to get up to speed. They've even provided a pre-level one to help teachers with those basic digital literacy skills. So that's been a response, definitely. And even in institutions, providing that digital literacy training has been huge for both learners and students, learners and teachers. My apologies. And to promote online course quality standards for instruction. And I believe that that's an extremely important point, that learning online is just not using a variety of different tools, but it's teaching learners to use like a learning management system and to access materials appropriately. Skills, developing the self-regulatory learning strategies. So whether that be time management, goal setting, there's a variety of self-regulatory learning strategies that are needed to learn online. It's quite different than when you're in a face-to-face environment and the teacher is supporting and there to help the learners regulate. It does require more self-regulation. So that's an extremely important factor to consider for online strategies. And developing those work-ready skills. We hear this in online learning all the time, that those Workforce ready skills like complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, judgment and decision making, negotiation, cognitive flexibility. All of these are really important for the workplace. Childcare to support newcomer women, childcare that is both accessible and affordable. At NorQuest, we don't have childcare associated with our LINC programming, but learners are often referred to programming that does offer that. And I know that there has been a lot of responsive organizations that have offered childcare to women without, when they have been unable to access any other programming. Partnerships with settlement organizations are crucial. That is a crucial, I think, factor in our pandemic reality, and supporting the whole learner, not just the language learning piece, but that settlement support goes hand in hand with language learning. And employment and career services. So with an increased focus on employment needs and career service outcomes. So I just quickly went through those, didn't I? And I had some questions because I think the discussion piece is really important for our organization, for our partner organizations, for LINC programming, really through Canada. We do need support. We need support to get learners through this pandemic and really support them. And I think crucial to that is question 1. How could partnerships with settlement organizations help support students enrolled in LINC programs? And what partnerships can you suggest? I know in our program at the beginning of the pandemic, so in March, we did partner with a settlement organization through the schools, kind of a Swiss program, and they were contacting the very low-level students, low language level students in their first languages and supporting them through understanding the process, logging in, understanding when to go and pick up a laptop if one was available for them. And that partnership really was invaluable. I'm not sure how those learners would have been supported otherwise. You know, we can support in first in the English language, but that first language support was really crucial. Sorry, I was trying to talk. I know there's a 30-second delay, so I'm not sure if we have any suggestions there, Lisa, or any questions.
Yeah,
or...
one just came in. The comment was, our organization has the ability to offer laptops to those who need.
That their organization does? Oh,
yeah,
wonderful.
Tara,
Yeah.
can I just jump in here? I need to clarify something before I get into trouble or something like that. I just wanted to quickly go back about the assessment piece, and I need to clarify, we have not reduced the number of assessments required for portfolio review. We have simply reduced and thus slowed down the accumulation of assessments. So prior to the pandemic, our 15-hour-a-week teachers were doing about 6 per month. Now they're doing about 3 or 4. And our evening instructors were doing 4 a month, and now they're only doing 1 to 2. To get a portfolio review, you still need 32 assessments with 8 assessments in each skill area. So I just want to clarify that. Thank you. Sorry to cut in.
Thanks, Christine. No problem.
Like
no problem. That's an important topic. It is really, yeah, that's a really challenging. PBLA online is very challenging. I think we could do a whole session just specifically on that.
And Tara, since no other comments have come in yet, I'd like to bring up the question that came up earlier about, would the results of this study transfer easily to other programs? The person was specifically asking about entrepreneurship programs. And I think that question goes to the whole panel with anybody with thoughts. One thing I would add to that is I think a lot of it will depend on the demographics of the participants. So if your participants have a similar demographic to the participants in the study, I would assume there would be some transfer, but it would be really looking at what of those features or factors are the same.
Yeah, it was interesting. I would totally agree, Lisa, because we did actually have a breakdown for each of our organizations, and it was interesting that Red River College does have a lot of more highly educated learners, and they start at a higher CLB level, and whereas Douglas College and NorQuest does serve very low-level literacy learners, and it was interesting to see some of those differences and how you know, of course the demographics certainly did change a lot of the some of the responses, but certainly time management and finding that quiet place to study, those self-regulatory skills were really high on the list. And I know that even at our organization, we've responded to that and have been developing materials around that to support learners a little bit more, because I think a lot of those things that teachers do in the classroom to support learners with time management and self-regulatory skills like that, just managing the environment, bringing their materials, being ready for learning, thinking critically, all of these things that teachers do in the classroom, there is more on the learner when they are learning online. So those skills really need to be embedded in a lot of programming. And that's where we are having to respond and adjust.
And there was a comment about the information being useful for other programs and the data about the digital divide and digital literacy. At the end of this session, we'll be putting up our contact information. Please feel free to reach out and we would be happy to send you our research report and the presentation, which has all the citations. So please just get in touch with one of us and we'll be happy to share that.
Yeah, and I've also put the references in the resource, in the reference list for New Language Solutions. A lot of their research that came out just before the pandemic, but it was 2020 on the digital divide is there, and it's also linked. So it's referenced and it's linked. So it's really interesting to see, because it's certainly true that the pandemic has just exacerbated this divide that was already there. So my other questions here, and maybe I'll just pose the questions and then see if there's any responses or any additional questions that come from that, because I know that we are at time and I'm not sure if we have an extra minute or anything like that because of the time lost. But just thinking about the digital skills for employment and how industry can support or perhaps partner in any way to support these digital skills. And what role the federal and provincial government has in helping people respond to the rapidly changing digital demands, especially when essential services are moved online. So those are some big questions I think that we all have as LINC programs, and certainly we've been talking to other partners, and these are really big concerns and questions that we have that we would love support or ideas with. So if you have those, that would be wonderful.
Since we're going to run out of time in a moment, I'll throw up the question that somebody else has asked is, do you see post-COVID that there'll be a lot more hybrid models in newcomer learning? And I'm speaking for NorQuest, I would say, yes, I do see that.
Absolutely. I think we've all talked about that quite a bit. And you know, the research is there. It shows that LINC blended or hybrid programming is really important and does provide that settlement, or helps with that settlement gap, teaches digital skills that are really important for employment. You know, we've just been really forced very quickly into accepting this as a reality. And yeah, I don't know if anybody wants to add to that, but I just also wanted. to show the last slide or last few slides just quickly before we return to any questions, that this project was funded by IRCC, and our references are here, and also our contact information is in the slides as well.
So we have a couple questions. How about I ask them in the panel, whoever would like to respond? I'm seeing that we still have a few minutes, so let's do our best to answer some of them. Are all of our LINC programs virtual now? Are we offering any face-to-face classes? And how are we managing distance in student groups?
So I can start and tell you what's happening in Manitoba. Since our COVID situation has become quite interesting in the number of cases that we're seeing, our province has actually shut down in that all of any programming that can be delivered online is delivered online. So we did, at the start of the pandemic, we moved everything, all of our classes online. And while the situation was kind of handled quite well, we were allowed to offer some face-to-face classes beginning fall. And those were offered for the lower level language learners, so stage 1 learners. They had a combination of face-to-face and online. The province has since shut down again, and all of our LINC classes are now offered online only. And I do think that's going to be the future of LINC delivery.
And for NorQuest, we have had 2 very low level language classes on site, on campus, just very part-time, and that is our foundation and CLB1 literacy, and that was going really well. We did have hopes of having our CLB1 to 4, so the stage 1 learners, on January. Whether or not that's a reality, I am not sure with our current cases, and if we will be completely online, but the rest of our programming is completely offered online. We have offered some onboarding sessions at the beginning of term that were on campus, but apart from that, for the stage 1 learners, but apart from that, it has been online.
And Tara, there's one response to Q3 here where funding is needed for settlement organizations to offer laptops and offer digital learning training, digital literacy training.
Mm-hmm.
So if I may speak to that, actually Red River College is involved in a project that is focused on developing digital literacy. I would have to check in with my colleague when that project is ending, but I think it's going to be either this year or early next year. So hopefully there will be more to come.
Thank you. Panelists, thank you very much for everything you've shared. This was a great research project, and I think it was pretty exciting to be a part of it. At this point, I think we'll say goodbye to our audience. Please don't hesitate to get in touch with us to get a copy of the study. We'll be more than happy to share it with you, and enjoy the rest of the sessions.